right, we are here at Zingerman's Roadhouse with Ari Weinzweig, the founder of the Zingerman's community of business, ZCOB, for those of us that know. And Ari was kind enough to take some time out of his busy day. A lot of us can find him at Zingerman's Roadhouse, and that's where we are today, actually, at the Roadhouse, sitting in the back booth during breakfast time. So thanks for coming on, Ari. Really
happy
appreciate
to do it, man. Thanks for doing what you do.
Well, I'm learning. I'm definitely learning and having fun, right?
That's the point.
The reason that I reached out to you and you were so kind to jump on was that I think every single one of my listeners knows what Zingerman's is. They know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
But I've had the fortune of learning some of those inside stories along the years that I tell to people when I take them to Zingerman's or when I have guests that I bring to the Roadhouse, and I'm trying to explain what Zingerman's is, which is, it requires a little depth to it. And I thought it would be cool to have you on to tell a few of those stories so that the next time we're at Zingerman's and we say, hey, what's this all about? Why is this cool? Like, well, there's a lot of reasons, but let me tell you the story behind this sandwich. Or when you're waiting in line, let me tell you the story behind this. And if it ever gets back to you that I heard that story, that would be cool for me. So,
cool.
So that's the goal. Let's see what we can do. So the first thing we have to ask, who's Greenberg? And what's the story behind that?
Well, that's a good quintessential beginning story. So
I know you love the quintessential questions.
Well, it's a good one. It's number one on the sandwich menu.
Right.
Is the direct and literal answer. And the direct and literal answer, which is actually more relevant for those about to eat, is it's corned beef or pastrami with chopped liver and Russian dressing and a little lettuce on rye. And I would order it with Montreal smoked meat instead of corned beef. But anyway.
Okay. that's
one of my often asked questions is what should I get? And
you go number one.
It's been a long time since I really sat down and ate a whole sandwich, but but anyway. So the story of the name. So when we were going to open the deli, do you want my whole background?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm from Chicago. I came to Ann Arbor to go to school at U of M.
Right.
I actually, well, let's see. I guess it's Ann Arbor. You can never be more than like 14 minutes from anything. But
I rounded up to 20. But
I lived at Alice Lloyd, so
great.
Not far from where your building is,
your
your space is. And then I lived on South Forest, so right around the corner from where you are.
I lived on South Forest too. I lived on Forest Court, actually.
Oh yeah.
In Iggy Pop's old house, which I hope will be a story that I do someday. But
yeah. This probably was right around the corner.
Right on.
That. Anyway, I came here. I studied Russian history. I studied the anarchists, which maybe we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
And then after I graduated, I just knew I didn't want to go home, move back home in order to do that and make it financially viable. I had driven a cab a little bit while I was in school. That was not all that exciting. One of my college roommates was a waiter at Maud's on 4th Avenue, just south of Liberty.
Right.
And so I went in there and I applied for a job as a server so I could make money and not go home. And, they interviewed me and they said, we'll call you if something opens. Clearly the employment market was different than it is today because they didn't call me. And then 2 weeks later I was like, all right, I have to go try again. So I applied as a busser and they didn't hire, they said they'd call me. And I waited a couple more weeks or whatever, and I was totally run out of money. So I went back and I said, "Hey, I'll do anything." They said, "Do you want to wash dishes?" I said, "Sure." I don't know, whatever. I didn't know anything about restaurants. I'll wash dishes. And so that's how I started. So I really just lucked out because I stumbled into work that I really loved. I had no knowledge of business, food, cooking.
Yeah.
No, I still don't think of myself as an entrepreneur. It's not. I never went into business to make money. I think making money is an important piece of business, but it's still not what motivates me.
It's not entrepreneur as a term of prestige as of like in the last 4 years, right? Up until that point, what's an entrepreneur?
Now it's hip, right?
It's hip, yeah.
But at the time, So anyway, and I had no background in food or cooking. My upbringing was all essentially industrial food. I mean, Kraft macaroni and cheese,
Right.
Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, Pop Tarts,
Right.
Tang, Captain Crunch, Captain whatever, Cocoa Krispies, Nestle's Quick, green Jello. I mean, all of that stuff. So I really
Jell-O.
just lucked out, and I came to love food and cooking, and then also met great people. So Paul Saginaw was the GM at the restaurant. That's how we met. Frank Carollo from the Bakehouse was a line cook, and Maggie Bayless from Zing Train was a cocktail waitress about a year later.
You
so
all
we
met there.
Met
Oh,
there,
great.
and it's now 40. I was just writing about it because Frank's actually going to retire next year.
Oh, wow.
So it's now like 40 years, over 40 years that we've been working together.
Wow, that's impressive.
Anyway, so I stayed and worked for that restaurant group, started prepping, line cooking, and running kitchens. So my background in the food world is known as back of the house.
Yep.
It's all of that. And then Paul left halfway through that, roughly, and opened Monahan's Seafood Market with Mike Monahan in Carytown. And he and I stayed friends. You know, we would chat here and there. And about doing something. And then fall of 81, I reached a point where it's not like I didn't like going to work. I just stopped. I didn't really love going to work. And I could tell where they were headed as an organization, even though they didn't do any visioning work the way we now teach it or do it. But, you know, where they were headed just wasn't where I wanted to head. And like they told me if I was going to go, the next step would be to move into the dining room as a general manager, but I'd have to take my earring out. I have three now. I had one then, which my stepfather told me I'd never get a job after I pierced my ear. But anyway, but I guess
Nowadays that's like the least controversial thing that you have.
Pretty soon there'll be a president with it.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so I decided I was going to leave there. November 181, I gave 2 months notice. Paul, not knowing I'd given notice, you know, called me because the little building by the fish market was coming open.
Oh, yeah.
And he had grown up in Detroit where you could get good deli food, and in Chicago where I grew up you could get it, but you couldn't get it in Ann Arbor. So somehow within like a week we decided we were going to open, and then 3.5 months later we were open, which was not just a small thing because it included like renovating the whole space. And, you know, getting the menu organized, costing the menu, writing the menu, pricing everything, ordering in retail product. And so we opened up on March 15th, 1982, which I somehow completely missed historically until last year when I was working on the Emma Goldman pamphlet, which came out in June for her 150th birthday. But that was the day the Tsar abdicated in Russia in 1917, was March 15th. So somehow I totally missed that, which is embarrassing. But anyway, that's how we opened. So we opened with 2 employees, me and Paul, 1,300 square feet, 25 sandwiches on the menu, a little bit of what is now called specialty food, but at the time was mostly just called weird because people didn't know what olive oil was, et cetera. Anyway,
would you have
up,
called that? Would you at the time is that deli food? That's what you would describe it?
Well, we did a lot of things. Anybody who does something meaningful is doing something that people tell them is a bad idea.
Yeah, 100%.
And later, you know, so Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction writer from then Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, I could look up the quote, but he, you know, said essentially like all revolutionary ideas go through 3 stages. Stage 1, it's completely impossible, it'll never work. Stage 2, it's possible but not very practical. Stage 3, I was behind it from the beginning. We have lived that one over and over and over again. Hugh MacLeod, Macleod, wrote an amazing little book called Ignore Everybody. You would love it.
Yeah.
You know, and he just said good ideas are always initially resisted because it changes the relationships with what is present in the moment. You know, and he goes later, after everybody told you it was a bad idea, suddenly everybody wants to be, on board with you.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was certainly true.
That's cool.
For all of this. But anyway, to answer your question directly, so we combine things that, which is what creativity is, having now studied it, but we combine things that weren't combined. So at the time, like, you didn't do food service and retail in one space. Like, it was like just not done.
Right.
And so when we did that, like, we were just like, well, we need sales and we want to stay in business. So
what else can we sell?
Why not? Right. And so the restaurant people thought it was stupid to sell retail, and the retail people were like, "Why do you want to be in the restaurant business?"
Yeah.
And then also we combined, Jewish food, Jewish traditional food, but then we were selling like ham hocks because we were in the old African American neighborhood.
Right.
And, and prosciutto and, stuff like that my grandmother, freaked out. And so those weren't supposed to go together either. And there's still like every year, once a year, person will write in about how horrible it is that we're a Jewish deli, but we sell pork. And it's like, but we've always sold pork, and we never claimed to be a kosher deli.
Right.
And, with all due respect, Jews have been eating pork illegally for as long as there's been laws. So anyway, shortly after we were getting ready to open, and we had to figure out a name. And so Paul's last name is Saginaw, which is Sagin Or in Russia, or was Sagin Or in Russia, which means seer of light in ancient Hebrew, which is very inspirational, but was anglicized like so many names were in that era to Saginaw when they came to the United States, which, nothing wrong with it, but it's a mid-sized industrial town and a reference to a Native American tribe, which is awesome, but doesn't make you think of corned beef.
Correct.
My last name is essentially unpronounceable, although you did pretty good.
Thank you.
And I don't really use it.
Yeah. Once you say it, Ari is all you can say, right?
Yeah, so that was out too, and so we went to his house, which had no furniture. These are good stories for you, which had no furniture, so we sat on the floor and we drank a couple beers. I mean, neither of us are giant drinkers, but like now I haven't had a beer in forever. But, we drank a couple beers and we made lists on those white sheets on the wall of brainstorm names, and we wanted an A or Z. Because...
first or last in the phone book?
Yeah. Now, sorry, I've completely forgotten. Okay, so I told you my brain is fried. So before that, though, we needed a name. So he suggested that we use the name Greenbergs because there was this elderly Jewish woman who was a customer at the fish market who was from New York named Hannah Greenberg.
Okay.
And I vaguely remember her, but he, has vivid stories of her. And, I don't know how old she really was when you're 20. I was 25. He was 31, I guess, when we opened. But
she was probably like 30.
She was probably 40, but whatever, So, but anyway, he describes her as this elderly Jewish woman from New York who had come into the fish market on Saturday morning, 4'11", and he says still in her bathrobe with her curlers in, and she'd go like, "Okay, give me," he'd say, "Mrs. Greenberg, can I help you?" And she'd say, "Give me 2 of those smoked chubs." And he'd go, "Well, how are those ones I sold you last week?" And she goes, "The bones, it almost killed me." And she go, "Give me 2 more." Anyway, so we thought, okay, she's a good, figure for our business. We'll name it after her. So about a week before we ordered the neon sign from a guy named Jeff Hine, Heyn, who had a company called Mr. Neon.
Oh, that's a great name.
It took like 2 weeks to get the sign made, and he made the sign Greenbergs.
Oh, the sign was made.
Yeah. And it came, and we hung it up, whatever, and before we opened. And like 2 weeks before we were going to open, or 10 days or something, the phone rang, and I answered the phone. And this is, of course, when phones had cords and were attached to walls. And I,
and twisty lines.
Yeah, good morning, Greenbergs, can I help you? And the guy's like, "Can I speak to Mr. Greenberg?" And I was like, "Well, there is no Mr. Greenberg. Can I help you?" And he goes, "Well, where'd you get the name?" I'm like, "Well, we made it up. Do you like it?" And he goes, "Yeah, I like it, and it's mine." And so. Anyway, he was going to open in Detroit. He had registered the name in Lansing before we did. It was his last name.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't remember all the legalities, but when it's your name, like, you have a legal right to use it. And then he had registered it in I don't know how it works anymore now because the lawyers do it. I don't do it. But in those days, you had to send in the form.
Yep.
And then, it could take 6 months before you got the form back.
Right.
And so we would have already been open before the form came back. But whatever. Anyway, so, he's like going to open in Southfield or something. And we're like, well, we knew from the beginning we only wanted one and we were going to only open here. So I'm like, we're only going to open here, whatever. Yeah. And he's like, no, we're going to open nationally. We're going to franchise this thing.
Yeah.
It's our name. You can, like, no matter what we said, he wouldn't let it. So then we were like, okay, we got to come up with a new name, and we only have 2 weeks. So then we went to Paul's house.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got it out of order.
That's all right.
And we sat on the floor and we brainstormed names and we put the white sheets up and we started writing names and we wanted an A or a Z because although it matters not at all anymore because on Google every letter comes up equally quickly, in those days A or Z was infinitely better from a marketing standpoint.
Our first name was A-1 Screen Printing and still our legal name, and you can still look it up.
There you go. Okay. Good trip. Well, when I have a podcast, which might not happen, and I interview you about stories, I'm going to ask that. So anyway, we picked Zingerman's, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
So then the Greenberg's neon sign actually hung on the inside wall. We moved it because, like, why waste it? It was good decor and it was a good story.
Right.
And it was up there for a long time until somebody broke it one day when they were cleaning it, probably 10 years in, 8 years in, which is a bummer. But anyway, so that's who's Greenberg. So the the original ad actually came out in the Ann Arbor Observer before we were open, and it was still Greenberg's because it came out like a month before we were going to open.
That's amazing.
And so, a lot of that stuff is now in the Bentley Library.
Oh, cool.
Because they took our archive.
The sign too, you think?
The sign broke.
But did they keep the broken?
No.
That would be amazing.
Neon, man. Yeah. It was like,
yeah, that was probably toxic at that juncture.
Yeah.
So it's an homage to the first name, the original name of Zingerman's.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. That one is enough.
Yeah.
For 3 trips, I think. But let's keep going. One of my top 2 favorite sandwiches is Mary's Commute.
Yeah.
Tell me the story about Mary's Commute.
So Mary's Commute is named after Mary Economo, who lives now in Florida for quite a long time, but was the dining room manager at Maud's.
Oh, back in the day again.
Back in the day. In fact, it's funny, but I was pouring water. I worked the floor, as you know, out here every night, pretty much, and I was pouring water in the other room last night, and nice family at the second booth in, table 102.
Yeah.
And they're eating dinner. I poured the water. The guy looks at me. He's like, "Did you used to work at Maud's?"
Are you that guy from Maud's?
And I was like, "Yeah." And I figured it was safe to say, I'm like, "You did too, right?" Like, I actually didn't remember it, but
that's hilarious.
He goes, "Yeah." So he used to work at Maud's. His name's Larry.
And he was like, "What are you up to now?"
Well, at the end, he was leaving, and I was pouring water at another table, and he was trying to catch my eye, and I went over there, and he goes, "No, it's okay." I'm like, "No, man, it's fine. Thank you for coming in." And he goes, "I just wanted to say, I feel awkward to say this, but you want to say it's just nice to see somebody in the food business, in the industry, doing it the way it's supposed to be done."
That's great. Great to
And
hear.
I was like, "Well, what are you doing now?" And he goes, "Well, I'm waiting tables." I'm like, "Where are you waiting tables?" He goes, "Somewhere I shouldn't be working." I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, we're hiring. Get over here."
That's awesome.
So anyway, who knows? Maybe he'll come back to work.
That's cool.
Okay, so she was the dining room manager. When we were getting ready to open, we didn't have any money. So all our friends, I'm sure you had the same thing, came and helped.
Yep.
She was one of them, and she was really good at training systems, and so she helped us with that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think by that point she had taken a job in Detroit with a bigger company, another company. At that time, the train used to go from the train station.
Hence why they call it Depot Town, right?
Correct, which I could tell you about the train station a little bit. But anyway, so the train left at like 7:20 in the morning to go to Detroit. And so we were decided we would open at 7 so that we could catch the morning commuters.
Got it.
And so it's chicken salad with bacon and mayonnaise on challah.
Yep.
Which I can't remember if that's what she really ate, but we'll just say it was. But anyway, but yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so it's for her. And
it's named for her.
Oh,
and
that's
she's
awesome.
still
and did she
going in Florida.
Oh, that's great. And kept in touch. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we have been talking about the deli, but we're at the Roadhouse.
Yeah.
And this is also, I remember when it wasn't the Roadhouse, but now I feel like.
Well, it was Bill Knapp's.
It was Bill Knapp's.
Yeah.
So
that's a story.
That's
too.
a story in itself. But now I think it's been around for so long. It's just I don't remember what it looked like before it was the Roadhouse.
Well, it's 16 years what are we in? 2020. So this is in September. Will be 17 years.
17 years. That's
so
crazy.
Bill Knapp opened his first restaurant in Battle Creek in 1957 or 8.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, in part 4 of the business book, every time I do the business books, I need to give some history because for people who read it without the other parts.
Yeah.
But then I try to write the history a little different version of it. And so this time in part 4, I did it as a history of the building.
Oh, cool.
And followed the history of the buildings through all of it. So there's the whole history of the Deli building, which I could tell you, which would actually be a good story.
We'll come back and do that one for sure.
But then I looked up Bill Knapp more than I knew because then I was telling the story of this building. So in, I think, 57, 58, he opened in Battle Creek. So his his creative wisdom, which I'm sure everybody told him was a stupid idea, was that he was going to grow by opening restaurants next to interstate highway exits, which in the 50s, the interstate highway system was barely existent. So like now people are, oh, you could take the scenic drive on old US 12 or whatever, but all there was US 12, and that's what so when they built the interstate highway, it was like this radical new, thing. So all of the Bill Knapps that were, and they got up to like 60 of them, mostly in Michigan, northern Indiana, the edge of Illinois, and I think that's it, maybe Wisconsin, and then they opened a few at the end in Florida. Which, but anyway, they were all like this within a half mile of the exit to the highway, and then they all had this exact footprint, which is like a T shape to the customer plus the kitchen in the back.
Right.
So this was a Bill Knapp's, and then when he passed away, I don't remember when, like late 90s, then it ended up going broke within like 4 years.
Right.
It was vacant. Anyway, so yes, we're at the Roadhouse.
So we're at the Roadhouse. So I wanted a homage to the Roadhouse. Tell us one great Roadhouse story. I'd heard there's a good story about Big Bad Voodoo Daddy.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what story, but I mentioned that. So Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, I actually had never heard of. You heard of them?
I had heard of them.
Well, their music's great. Now I've heard of them.
It was, it's like, ska in the time, 90s ska.
Yeah. Well, they're still touring.
Yeah, they're still doing it, for sure.
And they're good. I mean, when I looked at it.
Full band, right? Like the full sound,
right? Well, I know, but like you, I get a lot of inquiries for, interviews, which is fine.
Yeah.
And I got an inquiry for an interview from this woman, and she wanted to interview me about Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. And I'm like, okay, I don't know who it is, but I look them up, and then I'm like, okay, I actually pay an enormous amount of attention to music, and I like music, but I don't know anything about Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Like, why do you want to interview me?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, they said the Roadhouse is their favorite restaurant.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, what? So she sends me this link to this article that was in another interview with somebody, and they live in California. I mean, they've been touring for like 25 years or something. And they go all over the country every year for like, I don't know, 4 months. And so it's like some reporter said, like, well, where do you like to eat? And this was the place that they listed. So I'm like, wow, that's incredible. So anyway, so I listened to some of their music. I like it, and I like music. And so then when she interviewed me, I don't know what she's going to ask me. But anyway, I'm like talking, and I usually can come up with stuff pretty quick. But in the middle of the interview, she's like, well, if you were going to name a dish after them, what would it be? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. So I'm like, how about a burger with pulled pork on it and applewood bacon from Newski's, and the barbecue sauce at the Roadhouse, and the 7-year cheddar that we get from Tony and Julie Hook in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. And she's like, okay. So, like, I don't know, it's like sounded like bold and brassy like their sound, and I thought, okay, it's like big, bad, and it's voodoo, and it's like putting all that stuff together, like pulled pork and a burger you wouldn't normally put together.
Right.
And so she ran the article, and then I'm like, well, I think we should actually make, let's do the burger. We put it on.
You have to.
Yeah. And anyway, so then, I actually, she said, well, do you want me to connect you with them? I'm like, yeah, totally. So I ended up getting connected with them on email. And then I think the photo. I know the photos on the Roadhouse Instagram page, but they were just here like a month ago.
Oh, interesting.
So we put it back on again. You know, we run it here and there on occasion.
Yeah.
And it sells like crazy. And most people don't even know who they are. But I mean, it's.
And they don't know the story, I'm sure.
Oh no, they know the story
they know.
because I told them. And they love it. I mean, so they came in and they I didn't know they were coming, and it was Monday night they were here. And then, like, they're like, no, we planned or Tuesday night. They're like, we're not actually playing in Ann Arbor. They're playing in Kalamazoo. But they're, when they're on the road, they're like driving.
Yeah.
So they're like, we planned the whole tour so that we could stop here on whatever Tuesday night and then drive there on Wednesday, but we could have breakfast here before we leave. So they were here at night for dinner.
And for breakfast.
10 o'clock,
awesome.
They're back for breakfast the next morning, and then they left. So
That's
they didn't even play a
awesome.
concert here. So
That's amazing. That story in and of itself is worth keeping the sandwich on the menu year round, I feel.
Well, and it's really good.
Burger,
it is really good.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
So, well, I know you got to run, and
Yeah.
this has been awesome. I absolutely want to. I'd love to circle back on some of the history of buildings, because I think like that's the thing that we have here that I think is super interesting, and you obviously are super knowledgeable about it.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, man.
I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you
Thanks
too.
for doing what you do.
Appreciate it.